Welcome to the Explainer. So, picture this. You're in a meeting. Everything is going fine until suddenly, boom, a missed deadline drops, or a massive budget overrun rears its ugly head. The pressure instantly spikes, right? And just like that, a totally routine project update derails into this awful, defensive battle. We have absolutely all been there. Today, we're diving into relational intelligence. Specifically, we're unpacking a really practical field guide on how to actually facilitate these high-pressure conversations without losing your mind. Okay, let's just get right into it. Have you ever facilitated a meeting where the stakes just felt deeply personal? Like a situation where your technical expertise alone just wasn't going to cut it to keep things on track. It is incredibly stressful when emotions are running high, hidden fears are bubbling up, and assumptions are just literally colliding across the boardroom table. It's a really tough spot to be in, but honestly, it happens all the time.
There's this fantastic quote from our source material that I think hits the nail on the head here. It says, anyone can facilitate when agreement already exists, right? Like, the real test of our relational intelligence isn't just nodding along when everyone's already on the same page. The true challenge, the real work, is maintaining clarity, protecting dignity, and preserving direction when absolutely everything is on the line and the pressure is dialed up to 10.
So how do we actually pull that off? Well, here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to cover 1. Preparing the ground, 2. Holding the space, 3. The diamond framework, 4. Completing the loop, and 5. Stewardship and legacy. Basically, we're walking step by step from that awful pre-meeting anxiety all the way to building a lasting, positive legacy for your team.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, Preparing the Ground, Before the Meeting.
The big takeaway here is that a lot of difficult meetings actually fail before anyone even walks in the room. Why? Because people show up with different assumptions, incomplete info, and totally competing views of reality. To stop that before it starts, you need 3 absolutely crucial prep steps. Number 1, define the purpose. What problem are we actually trying to solve? People literally cannot align if the destination is a blur. Number 2, plan by separating facts from stories. And number 3, identify your stakeholders. You got to know who needs to be there and who actually has the authority. Leaving out key voices just creates a massive headache later on. A great rule of thumb? Inclusion up front is almost always cheaper than trying to repair things later.
Let's actually zoom in on that second point for a second. Look at the stark difference between facts, stuff like drawings, reports, hard schedules, and stories, which are essentially our own emotional interpretations and judgments. Leaning on insights from Daniel Kahneman, it's wild to see how quickly really smart people will jump straight from a simple observation to a heavy interpretation, usually without even realizing they're making assumptions. In a high-tension room, reality has to become visible before anyone's opinions can actually be useful. You've got to peel apart the hard evidence from the emotional spin.
All right, moving right along. This brings us to Section 2, holding the space during the meeting. So you're in the meeting, and things are getting heated. Remember, your job isn't to be the loudest voice in the room. Your job is to protect the process. To do that, you've got a triad of core responsibilities. First up, maintain clarity. You do this by constantly, and I mean constantly, bringing everyone back to the central question. Second, protect dignity, by totally separating the people from the problems. And third, preserve direction. You got to shift the group out of emotional reaction and into concrete action. Leaning on these 3 pillars is what stops teams from drifting into old grudges or those endless, exhausting defensive spirals. Let's look at exactly how you protect dignity in the real world. Instead of asking, who is responsible, which, let's be honest, instantly makes people put their guard up and start pointing fingers, pivot. Ask this instead. What ownership is required to move forward? That little tweak? It's an absolute game changer. You get the accountability you need, but without the humiliation. People feel respected, and they're way more willing to actually jump in and help solve the problem. Now, to keep the momentum going, here are 4 practical rapid-fire techniques you can keep in your back pocket. First, slow the pace. Pressure screams at us to go fast, but real understanding, that takes time. Second, surface assumptions. Actually ask people what hard evidence is backing up their views. Third, make dissent useful. You want to invite different opinions. Pushing dissent underground just leads to nasty surprises down the road, while getting it out in the open actually makes for better decisions. And finally, return to shared purpose. You've got to find that common ground that's buried underneath everyone's competing demands.
Now, to kind of tie all of this into one cohesive strategy, let's jump into Section 3, the diamond framework, navigation under pressure. I want you to think of this overarching diamond structure as basically your ultimate compass. Just look at how it maps out the flow of facilitation. It takes you from vision and anticipation all the way at the top and right, down into context and accountability at the bottom, and then over to evolve and adaptability on the left. It's designed to make sure you don't miss a single crucial step when you're navigating these high-stakes conversations.
Let's break these nodes down, starting right at the top. First, define task asks the big one. What is the actual core issue we're addressing here? Then, planning asks, what information, stakeholders, and constraints do we have to factor in? These are your immediate tactical, boots-on-the-ground steps. You have to map the problem out crystal clear before you let anyone jump straight to trying to fix it.
Okay, sliding over to the right side of the diamond, we see how this builds. This is where we shift gears from abstract planning into real, concrete accountability. Development is where we explore our options, what's actually on the table. Then, implementation is where we ask the tough questions. What exact actions are we taking, and most importantly, who actually owns them?
Now let's pan out and look at the bottom and left nodes. This is the pivot from just getting stuff done to actually learning from it. Assessment is where we look at the evidence. Did our path work? Reflection unpacks the assumptions that maybe clouded our judgment. Lessons decides what we're taking with us into the future. And character, which, honestly, gets skipped way too often, defines how the team is actually growing culturally. We'll touch on that specific piece again in just a second. But first, let's tackle Section 4, completing the loop after the meeting.
A lot of folks think the job is done the second everyone packs up and leaves the room. But honestly, a facilitator's true value really shines after the meeting ends. Let's walk through this wrap-up process. Step 1. Record your decisions. Get the receipts. Human memory is famously terrible, and getting it in writing protects everyone's alignment. Step 2. Review the outcomes. Did the things you decided to do actually work? Step 3. Reflect on the process. Figure out what caused the friction in the room so you can facilitate better next time. And Step 4. Reinforce learning. Update your protocols so the organization actually gets smarter and doesn't just repeat the same mistakes.
Which brings us right to our fifth and probably most impactful section, stewardship and legacy, the ultimate outcome. This right here is where we totally shift our mindset. We're zooming out from just managing one stressful Tuesday afternoon meeting to actually stewarding the entire culture of the team. The Diamond Framework makes sure that the tension you feel becomes learning. Then that learning turns into actual capability. And finally, that capability builds your team's character. Because every difficult conversation leaves a residue, right? Good stewardship guarantees that this residue actually builds trust, deepens accountability, and grows courage, instead of just chipping away at it.
At the end of the day, transforming conflict is about using these really tough conversations to crack open brand new possibilities. We really have to step back and ask ourselves, when the pressure's on, is our team fracturing and getting fearful? Or are we actually becoming more cohesive and courageous?
Because the truth is, every single difficult conversation produces two outcomes at the exact same time: a decision and a legacy. Your job when you're facilitating under pressure isn't just to force a decision across the finish line. It's to steward both of those outcomes in the right direction. So I want to leave you with this one thought to chew on. The next time the tension spikes in your meeting, what kind of team are you going to choose to become?